Einen wunderschönen guten Nachmittag. Schön, dass noch so viele den Weg hier in den Dome gefunden haben. Könnt ihr noch? Habt ihr noch Platz für Input? Ja? Sehr gut. Weil jetzt kommt eine sehr, sehr wichtige und vorausschauende Keynote, Leading the Sustainable Transition von Harald Neidhardt. Ich denke, die meisten werden ihn kennen. Ich habe mir das mal so überlegt und angeschaut, was er schon in der Vergangenheit alles gemacht hat und ab wann er sich schon Gedanken über die Zukunft gemacht hat. Und ich bin dazu, es klingt komplizierter als es ist. Er hat sich schon in der Vergangenheit Gedanken über die Zukunft gemacht und diese Zukunft ist schon längst vorbei. Das heißt nicht, dass er sehr, sehr alt ist, sondern dass er sehr, sehr früh schon erkannt hat, dass die Gedanken, die wir uns für die Zukunft machen müssen, sind die entscheidenden und wichtigsten überhaupt. Welche Zukünfte das sind und wie er das erreichen möchte und überhaupt, er ist CEO und Curator vom Futur Institut, was das da alles zusammenhängt, was die Mission ist und wie unsere Zukunft aussieht, das werdet ihr jetzt erfahren. Großen Applaus für Harald Neidhardt.
Hello. I will talk in English because otherwise I will talk in Denglish, and I think this is maybe easier on the translator, or you have now to use another translator. Maybe that's part of our future too, right? Welcome. As you know, I'm Harald. I'm working with the Futur Institute, and we work with leaders in sustainable innovation to see how can we co-create desirable futures. Let me see if I can take you on a little ride. Maybe it's a roller coaster ride. It should be a smooth ride, but we know we're not in easy times. But if you think about the future, what do we think about? Beauty, wonder, magic. Maybe not quite, but it should be, right? This is, who has kids? All right. And the rest is also very young. And we know this is more where we are. This is our planet, and we think we have to go through a big, you would say transition. I want to talk about metamorphosis, and I tell you in a little bit. I want to talk about moonshots today and how do we think differently in our innovation approach, in leadership, and also how do we try to make this conversion, this really innovation jump, leapfrog that we have. And it seems so impossible, but it was not impossible when you think about JFK and his famous words in 61. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth. Obviously, we would now say him and her and everything, so there's a lot of things we have to do and achieved already. But there was also this unbelievable feat that these feats were landing on the moon just before this decade was out. And I remember I was like maybe a couple of years ago, 2, 3, that this was a big thing on TV. And since then, I feel there's something about this tech optimism, if you want. A tech person, and maybe some of you, an engineer, is looking at a problem and say, okay, this is a tough nut to crack. How can we do it? And if I look at people in sustainability right now, or the past couple of years, you think about, okay, it's mostly, let's say, politicians, frameworks, and that might be a totally different time frame. But in the same amount, just 8 years ago, and 7 years ago, the UN declared their moonshot, maybe as an Earth shot, and said, well, until this decade is out, we need to solve the climate crisis in the Paris Agreement. And at the same time, also setting up the UN goals, not only for climate in the Paris Agreement, but also the SDGs as a framework to think about sustainable and our resilience towards the future, which is basically on the horizon. Now, before this decade is out, we are in a similar situation. until 2030, before this decade is out, we need to solve the unsurmountable and say, how do we solve the climate crisis? How do we solve and address the SDGs? And how do we even invent half of the solutions we need, as Bill Gates says, to achieve this goal? And we have been, or we are basically in the same situation. I need all of you to be Kennedys. You have to think like this, that's possible, you have to work like this, and we have to collaborate. We have to see what is our North Star, the future of our Earth, and how do we achieve it. So before this decade is out, we have to solve the climate crisis. Before this decade is out, we have to solve the SDGs. And before the decade is out, we have to maybe listen to youth and science in order to achieve the SDGs. The photos I show is, let's say, already maybe old, because if you think about the heat here, the heat in Germany, the devastation in the forest, as well as the reality of the now, then these photos you just saw should be maybe more from Brandenburg or from south of France. Speaking of time, if you think about Paris and a 4-degree solution, people say, well, if we don't do anything and we can reach 4 degrees in climate separation in 2100, Paris, everything south of Paris will be part of the Sahara. So who has kids which are maybe 20 years or younger? Your kids can no longer visit Paris unless they go, snowboarding on dunes. There's a nice picture, you should look at it. Okay, if you talk about, who is thinking about these solutions and where do you go? You go maybe to COP. I was in Glasgow November last year, and there was one side event. It was a big show. We worked together with the UN Climate Change Secretariat in order to help them. What is actually the program after the SDGs in 2030? And that is 8 years from now. But we started the process 3 years ago. 2019, we took about 100 people, met them in South Korea, a whole global organization of the world, of the UN and their people, similar to this conference, and talked about what is the program after we have maybe not achieved the SDGs. And so you can think about, just let us sink in that the UN already thinks about some of these in time frame, which is if we don't achieve it, what do we have to do? Obviously, you have to have a program. But can you develop a program 11 years before it can start? I don't know. But what Youssef Nassif, the UN Director for Adaptation at the UN, says, if you look at the SDGs, they're basically trying to solve the problems of 2015 by the year 2030. But you also know, as engineers, as scientists, as business developers, as innovation, as citizens even, that we will have very much different problems right now coming up than what was done in 2015. So here was a side event, and this one sentence, I think, for me at least, changed very much the perspective of time. So don't forget 11 years. The CEO of the Deutsche Bank, Christian Sieving, said, we will go all into the ESGs, otherwise we will be out of business in the next 3 to 4 years. This is not 2030, this is 3 years from 2025. The AG, the heart of the German AG might go out of business. Who is familiar with the term ESG, environmental, social, and governance? Good. You have to start working on this. For those who don't know, just yesterday, the day before, the EU signed this law that starting for about 2024, 2023, every company with more than 250 employees and 40 million in revenues has to start reporting on ESGs. And that is about 50,000 companies in Europe which have to start making a report and show the numbers to a bank. And the bank might decide if you're a stranded asset, are you Shell or are you a nursery? And just take this example of a successful, let's say, bakery chain in Paris, and they have maybe 40 stores, couple of people, good revenue, they have a couple of little shops at the airport we all like. This company now, the CEO is now a chief sustainability officer, and he might go to the bank and say, hey, I need this, we're opening a new shop, I need 150,000 to, as we always did the last 20 years. And the bank says, no. The water consumption on your croissants is no longer in line. And by the way, we cannot give you only the money, we have to cancel the account. Sorry, you can no longer bank with us. This will happen in the next 3 to 4 years. And that means that the revolution of what can we achieve by 2050, 2030, will come to 2025. And we all know what Habeck is doing on the job with the German industry, that we have to solve things in the next 2 winters. So if you don't have a sense of urgency by now, I think this will come very close. So these are just a couple of data, but you see PwC, for example, they're trying to employ and hire 100,000 people, specialists in ESG. And they're already doing it because there's a need, but there's probably also an opportunity to sell these for 3,000 a day. And I bet also here we're having sustainability experts like Nicholas. And and there's this other thing, every company will basically be turned around. And only 15 people, let's say, heard about this. So there's not only the outside world, there's the technology, we're living in this exponential time. And we understand, let's say, every 2 years there's an iPhone, let's say, which is faster, or the Moore's law. This is sort of what we know as educated people. But we have this climate change, which is exponential. We are going through an exponential curve with COVID, where Merkel explains what exponential is. And on the other hand, you also see that not only robotic, AI, nanotech, biotech, everything is on an exponential curve. So how do we go about it? Because it's not only technology, it's our society, democracy, capitalism. Everything comes down to change. Now the question is, can we, if we talk about a digital transformation, I started very early, I think in '85 or something, at my first email address, and started to build Lufthansa first, online booking system in 1993, and a lot of things. So since then, since 30 years, we know we're in a digital transformation. We have to all digitize. And if you tell me that you're starting a digital journey now, or some of your clients, this is only the innovation blockage that they had the last 20 years, which I think could be a systematic. But there's chances, and that's what I want to talk to you about. There's something happening, and here's a chance that we here, we in Germany and we in Europe, can really be trailblazers for this future. But it's not about what we have seen in digital transformation as the last 30 years. If we now go and have a sustainable transformation, we don't have time. We don't have 30 years. So I asked you to think of it more as a metamorphosis. So we have to go through not only, let's say, it's not a change, an era of change. It's a change of eras. We really have to go into a leapfrog, a whole different set of how we think and where do we put our talent. And so if you look at the butterfly, that is the story where you have, let's say, a caterpillar which goes through a process, and out is this beauty. And a lot of people, basically, literally, we have been all in a cocoon the last 2 years, right? We have been at home, we have been at home, and most people will want to go back to be a caterpillar. But we have to go out there and try to be and dare to be a butterfly. What can that be? What is a new organizational form? What is your leadership style? What is your company, your startup, or how do you work with talent that you can address these challenges in the next 3 to 4 years and not in the next 2 or 3 decades? So how do we do this? So there's obviously innovation. We talk about, this is the founding team of Climeworks, which basically is doing what a lot of people are doing in this region, is bending metal in order to suck out CO2. And a lot of people are doing it and giving them money, and there's a lot of pilots in Iceland, and let's say a lot, 2 or 3. But there's a way to really think about, okay, how can we not do things, or how can we reverse things? obviously we have to see if we can address some of the challenges and really think in a different way. And so let's talk, for example, about two things. One is plastic. So there's sort of this gigantic problem, and if we don't do anything, by 2050 there's more plastic in the ocean than fish. And we already eat everybody a credit card size of plastic today. How was yours? Good? With a wine or with a coffee? So there's obviously, let's say, a chance. First of all, we need to avoid anything. That's number one. There's other ways. Okay, is there a way to recycle or recapture? Here's some example what Parley of the Ocean is doing together with Adidas, and there's a lot of other companies trying to do it. One thing is we have to get the plastic out. Number two, obviously, we have to see if we don't even get plastic in. But once you have it, you can get into new products and see if there's part of the circle. Now, that's not an easy solution, or maybe that's a straight line, and I will tell you in a second what is the difference. And I learned today, obviously, I'm always learning that this is a good example for nice. People start to think in a different way. But obviously, the amount of energy going in and chemical processes in order to get rid of the plastic and make it somehow reusable, we have an expert here who talks. So it's not easy, and it can even be more harmful to the environment, but at least there's one way to think about it. And there's multiple ways what you can do with the plastic, and we probably have a new way also how we consume and see if there's alternatives. Yesterday, I was with Niklas, we were at Green Tech Festival, and looking at around, there was a little booth of which was nice, and then somebody's, oh yeah, this is actually an old windmill. What is this? The wing of the windmill of these, and that these are either dumped in the ocean or just buried because you cannot recycle the wing of this windmill. And then they cut it down, and then you made it like little garden lounge or something like that. Also not the ideal thing. It's actually good to have it because you see the problem, and hopefully if you see the problem, you can address it. And we know there's all of these things, are basically in this whole supply chain, and every step of the way you can have systems and see, okay, how does this system change? On every single way, you have to try to address it. And also, we have to probably no longer think in a supply chain, but it should be a supply circular economy. Now, if we want to apply this maybe in the car industry, and ESG means that you also need to report all of the data, not only of your own CO2 emissions and what your own company is doing, but also your suppliers. I talked to one chief sustainability officer, and she said, okay, in order for me to make the reporting, and she is already working in one of the largest car manufacturing suppliers here nearby, she says, I have to talk to 40,000 suppliers on her own in order to get their data. So we have to take everything apart, and for every single knob and cranny and a cable, you have to provide the data. And if you cannot provide this, your company will have to pay emission trading fees and so on and so forth. I think this is a huge opportunity because this means that every single piece needs to be replaced, and that the CFO, who has to otherwise pay fees and taxes, might just increase your innovation budget and say, okay, I just pay 2 million a year just because we do this, we have this compound which we cannot take apart, so can you please do it? And so the innovation, what you have to are bringing in the talent to digital transformation, you have to now apply it, please, to sustainable innovation. And there will be a talk later, so I will just leave this here on stage. Please don't spend it on the metaverse in 20 years or something like that. We have to please spend your talent here and now and for the future of yourself and your children. Now, if you take this apart, one component is the battery. I was listening to the other talk. Just to give you an example of, let's say, straight line thinking. 500 kilos is about the battery. There's about 12.5 kilos of lithium in there. In order to get this sourced, we need to move 25,000 kilos of earth and per battery, and 45,000 for the lithium, and for the whole battery about 250,000 kilos. So in Portugal, they have found just a huge lithium, reserve, and they might, they think it's like the new oil, but basically they probably turn half of Portugal in the north into the moon. And in addition, for 1,000 kilos of lithium, we have to touch 2.273 million liters of water. Phew. If you see that, what's the change you want to be? And so I know you think, a lot of the industry thinks about concept cars, right? So where are we going? And the concept car is something which is outside of the horizon 1, 2, and 3. What is new for the industry? How you push towards it? And what is maybe the most technically feasible future in cars? Well, this again is sort of your straight line. You are here, your vision is, okay, we make the coolest, slickest, electronic car. But what you should really think, okay, what are these probable futures? What is possible? In what city will my car drive in 7 or 10 years from now? But there's something else, and that is you have to jump higher. You have to say, what is not the possible, what is the desirable? So you have to think harder and not say, okay, yes, we can do it, we can build this fancy, but you have to build this rocket ship up there and say, where could you be in 5 or 10 years from now, and develop that vision. Maybe use a little bit sprinkle of Star Trek in there for your storytelling, and then we can take a car company and say, if your straight line is probably this electric car, thinking about all the challenges I already taught, is that really the solution? If we don't even know right now the batteries, yes, we have maybe digital twins. What are we doing with batteries in 10 years from now? How can you recycle them? Where do we dump them, basically? There's no solution. We're going in an industry with millions of cars, and there's no solution. But I think in this room, in this town, in this region, and in this country, and in Europe, we have the engineers, and we have the capacity, and there's European funding, and this is a chance of a lifetime for all of you and all of us to think, where do we want to be? And maybe this is, let's say, going out in the outside of this industry, but actually I don't think this is a solution, not at all. We have to think that's another probable solution, and that's something you can technically do. I think it's more like, how can we make mobility without cars? How can we, and I'm not against any engineers and so on, I'm just thinking, how can, for example, if Lufthansa, Mercedes, any of these companies would have bought Zoom 5 years ago? You can make connections, people can be mobile, you can increase your, the bottom line, you can increase your stock price, everything. People can make amazing connections here, now, but they don't move. And this is a challenge. So how can you think one more notch? How can you think a little bit more crazy? And that's moonshot thinking. If somebody says, oh, we can make a pink car, normally you sit in a room and say, what do you mean pink car? Oh, God. You have to say, pink car, amazing. Let's make yellow dots and make it green and make something else. So that's the encouragement I try to convey. If you go moonshot thinking, you are not going to the moon or land, but actually you go there and have that perspective back and look at your task list of the day. This is from Martin Wysowski. So if you go from your horizon 1, first not think what is feasible and what is sort of the plausible thing, what are everybody expecting? What is the unexpected? What can be the next challenge? What would a startup do? What would somebody do if money would not be an option? And how can you do crazy things? And if you think about that moonshot, the one big thing is that it's not about landing on the moon. It's about the change of perspective, that you look back on Earth, where we are. That's the only one we have, the only one we can think of. And everything you see around here has been designed by people, as Steve Jobs says. And somebody like you, somebody like all of us, is helping design this world. And we together can build something which is more beautiful if we have the aspect, let's say, our focus, our perspective on this Earth shot. So, last example of how you think. Foster & Partners, famous architecture company, are participating in competitions, ideas about the future. For example, how do you live sustainably in extreme conditions like the Mars. And some people might go there at one way, but it was not about going there or building it. But basically, if you go on Mars, you would not bring bricks. So how can you build something without the resources? You basically maybe 3D print and take the dust and so on. But you take this thinking and then you apply it to the largest sustainable building in the world, built by the same architect, going through this idea, leadership transition, thinking, new materials, the whole thing, how you think about extreme in Mars, and then apply it back, and people admire the beauty of something which is out of this world. And that is my ask for you. So our belief is that ideas and innovation really drive this, regenerative economy within the planetary boundaries. And all of us, we live in this place called home. And I ask you to come with me, think, ideate, have crazy ideas, and think about something which is for the future, but the future starts 3 to 4 years from now. Thank you very much.
Vielen herzlichen Dank, Harald Neidhardt. Schön, dass du da warst. Hier gibt es jetzt kurz eine kleine Umbaupause von 10 Minuten und dann beginnt das letzte Panel hier auf dieser Bühne. Später wird es hier auch noch eine sehr exklusive Aufführung von den Ludwigsburger Schlossfestspielen geben, dazu später mehr. Und es gibt noch ein bisschen Hip-Hop und später auch noch Live-Musik und noch 2, 3 Sachen, die noch ein bisschen Überraschung sind. Das sehen wir gleich alles hier auf der Dombühne. In 10 Minuten geht's weiter und QR-Code gibt's auch noch.